Hey everyone, my name is Jared Schneider, Executive Vice President at CALSTART, a national nonprofit focused on zero emission transportation. I am here today with John Stafford, Chief Commercial Officer of ZETI North America. John, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well. So let's go ahead and start out with kind of level setting everybody. Like, tell us about ZETI.
Yeah, happy to. So, ZETI was founded in 2020, and really the goal here is to address the growing disconnect between capital, assets, and data across transportation and energy markets. I mean, the demand for sustainable fleets, equipment, energy infrastructure over the globe just exploded over the last decade. But what I know, coming from two of the largest fleet management companies in the United States, is the financial systems used to finance and manage those assets simply hasn't kept pace. I mean, a lot of these systems were built 50 years ago, 70 years ago, and the pace today of data and integration just breaks these old legacy systems. So really, ZETI was built to bridge this gap. We combine structured asset finance with real-time asset data and modern software to make the entire process seamless.
Well, they always say that successful businesses are all about timing, and I appreciate that you guys took 2020 as your as your target date to launch. So, John, you mentioned working for some of the largest asset management groups. Could you talk a little bit about your own background? Like, how'd you get into this?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I've spent over 20 years in the fleet management ecosystem. So out of college, I was recruited by Enterprise. Believe it or not, back then it was a rental car company, and I was brought into this concept called mobility. So we were breaking out the business to create enterprise fleet management, which was in the Baltimore market. I was part of the founding team. I was the first finance manager, and we started with 0 customers and 0 cars. But really that focus was on those smaller, local businesses to help them to grow their fleets, to run them efficiently, concepts like total cost of ownership, and really grew that market. Had the privilege of working with a really successful team. Was promoted up to New England at the time. I think it was the 3rd largest market in the country. Had an opportunity to do that in New England, and then really shifted over. I was in a COO, CFO type role to LeasePlan USA. If you're not familiar with LeasePlan, at the time they were the only global fleet management company in the world. We were in 34 countries, managed about 1.5 million vehicles, and where Enterprise was those small local brands. LeasePlan was the largest global fleets in the world. So had an opportunity to do some business development with them. And then in 2020, I was asked to lead the United States commercial team. So a really exciting thing that happened during 2020, and for me, what really changed my whole perspective on the opportunity I have here is, we all got sent home. We closed all the offices. I was on a sales team, and you started watching the news, and you've seen things like the climate change in Los Angeles. It almost felt like overnight. And you start watching videos of being able to see the Himalayan mountains for the first time. And it was amazing that, it felt like there's so many problems in the world you can't solve, but it feels like decarbonizing transportation is one that's really solvable, and felt like I really had an ability to make an impact there. So we were extremely privileged in 2020 for the next couple of years as I led the team to partner with companies like Amazon, Novartis Pharmaceuticals, CBRE, Sherwin-Williams, to really launch the first large-scale electric transportation initiatives in the United States. And really was an exciting time. At the same time, we were putting together Wheels, LeasePlan USA's operation, and Hertz fleet management company called Donlin. So I led integration management office for those 3 companies. But really what got my passion was the ability to make an impact in sustainability in this new space. And about 3 years ago, was asked to come over to ZETI and lead our United States commercial team, where that's really, our passion and our drive here is to, continue to make the space broader in the United States, which has certainly had some unique challenges versus, what we see in the rest of the world.
John, I really like the way that you framed it and thinking about what the outcome can actually be, because it's very rare that you're actually able to kind of get a glimpse of the work that you do, what the future could be if you achieve your goals. And you brought up such a great point, like LA being cleaned up, seeing the Himalayan mountains, like that's all possible, and we know it's possible. So I love that you have that passion for it, and really, where you're going with it. So with that, and with ZETI, what are the, who can benefit from working with you all?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what we do is we enable origination, financing, and management of transportation energy assets through a single cloud-based platform. So I'd say probably three things we really do for organizations. First is we connect capital with assets. Second is we manage those assets and finance in one place. And third is really to be able to help that capital to be smarter, more flexible, more strategic with some really unique models such as, a pay-per-use model, which we're really known for in Europe especially. But, I think if you're in the United States, I think two distinct value propositions for us. First is we create a marketplace. So we work with about 50 different capital providers in the United States. So for all the organizations out there that are out there getting capital, it's a diverse and fragmented ecosystem. You've got equity providers, debt providers, private capital, small regional banks, big major players, private equity. It can be really challenging for a company to know how to go to market and how to find the right people. And something that we really take a lot of pride in is really working with those companies to put together complete, well-organized, bankable packages with a clear narrative so that when we connect them with the right lenders, those lenders are able to do one of two things. Either A, get to term sheet quick, so really help get these capital for these assets these companies need, or two, be able to say no quickly, which is really a benefit for everybody. Because if it's not a good fit, we want to really connect you with the right fit. And that's where we've really learned from working with our network lenders of they all have a very specific appetite of they want a cheeseburger with pickles and ketchup, no mustard, French fries on the side. So, it really helps a lot to be able to connect those two together. But, I really think the core second distinct market for us is creating ZEOS. So what I would say is it's a single pane of glass that both an operator and a lender can see and speak the same language. Where traditionally what you would have is an operator managing vehicles and connected vehicle platform data, maybe in a platform like a GeoTab or a Samsara. And then they have their loan servicing and billing and portfolio data on Excel spreadsheets and Google Docs and people's workbooks where we bring all that together. We automate loan servicing, billing, collections, but really I think the advantages of having, real-time live asset data and putting together that operational and financial layers is what really makes something special and is really, I think, the secret sauce for us here at Zeti.
Yeah, I like that. So you guys are really kind of pulling everything together into one place so that you can see and manage everything as a fleet operator. And I do like the idea of, again, having owned my own business in the past, trying to work with lenders and figuring out who wants what and what they want. Oh my gosh, that is a job in and of itself, which is where I guess you guys plug in. So that's great. That's great. I want to just out of curiosity, pay-per-use. Well, tell me what that is. Like, what are they doing over in Europe that maybe we aren't doing?
Yeah. So, I had the advantage when I worked at LeasePlan of, once a month we would meet with 34 countries. And I would say America loves to be unique, whether we're talking about Fahrenheit versus Celsius or metric versus, we are a unique market in that we like what's called an open-end lease model, which is really kind of a shared ownership with fleets. Rest of world, especially Europe, they're used to closed-end leases, which is more of kind of think of a dealership model where you pay a fixed amount every month for this asset. At the end of it, the risk isn't yours. You turn the keys into the dealership. And as long as you didn't beat the car up or go over miles, you just walk away. You don't worry about what the car's worth in the market. You don't worry about what it's going to be sold for. That is their problem. So over there, pay per mile is just a really, I think translation of moving from a fixed monthly payment to moving for a utilization-based payment. So London, one of the things we're known for is black cabs. If you've ever been to London or seen London, I'm sure everyone's familiar with what the black cabs look like. So, they are tasked to be zero emission. I believe 2030 is the date. So we have over 4,000 assets in Europe, and a good chunk of those are really those black cabs. So what we identified, especially as we mentioned 2020 enclosures, is if for operators, if we could match their revenue with the cost of their asset, it made it much more efficient for them and really helped to, get funding to where it needed. So typically the way we do it is it's set up on a, twice per year kind of true up, but you can see in real time, if you drive 1,000 miles this month, your payment is X. If you drive 500 the next month, your payment is Y. So we've really helped to be able to be creative. I've not seen a model in the United States that's similar to it. So I think there's some really interesting use cases. I mean, I think EV charging is a really great example of where that can make sense, as well as things like, ride sharing and potentially autonomous taxis, for example, could really be a good application for some of the technology.
So that's really interesting. And I know that's not what we were here to talk about, but that is really, but it's really interesting to hear that kind of model. Again, having owned my own transportation company, I would be all over that, because I already know my revenue side of this. It's always while I have fixed expenses, it'd be great to be able to marry those two together in a more, I guess, like fashion where they're tied together. But neither here nor there right now. But I do like the autonomous part of that. That's actually really interesting. So talking a little bit about what's going on in Europe, I think it was 95 degrees in London today with no air conditioning on rail. Oh my gosh. Like
I
the
was
subway
told that you can't buy a fan, ice cream, or ice in London right now.
Oh, man. Well, all the more reason to go zero emission at this point for them. Jeez. So talking about Europe and what you guys have learned, like what would you say, like kind of, and you mentioned it, like that Europe was, obviously ahead of us in certain things. What are some of those learnings that you would say translate from there back to here that you guys use looking at the US market?
Yeah, I think the experience in UK was really a proving ground for us. Again, I mentioned, over 4,000 assets on our platform. We have some great forward-thinking clients. Paragon Bank is a really great example of somebody who understood that creative pay-per-mile financing could really help get the capital to where it needed. Octopus Investments, Autocar is the largest Uber partner in Europe. So really I think when you get forward-thinking clients who can look at things differently, what's possible is really anything. I think, we've proved that, transparency with live asset data helps remove fear, especially, when you're talking about assets that don't have a ton of life. Zero emission technology is still new. Internal combustion engine cars have been on the road for 100 years. So, when you get a lot of these lenders, they're not familiar with the assets. They have fear about what that looks like. So, I think the biggest trend from Europe to the US is really that shifting demand for more flexible, data-backed financing models. Regardless of who the lender is, I think everybody's looking to reduce risk. And to me, you reduce risk with data. You reduce risk with visibility to utilization, to, our platform, we pull in data from Black Book for the values of vehicles, for example. So we can show you on a curve how that vehicle's life cycle moves and then what the loan is worth. So you can see at all times what the equity or risk in that vehicle is worth. So it really helps not only the operator manage those assets better, but helps the lender to understand the real risk versus perceived risk when they're looking at assets that maybe they're not familiar with.
Is that also something that that insurance companies will be looking at as well to determine kind of not just residual value, but any value along that curve?
Yeah, and I think you see it today. I think you see the Allstate commercials where, hey, if you plug in, a connected vehicle aggregator, they will lower your insurance because now today, I mean, it's amazing to me. Like, 20 years ago, believe it or not, the way that we got data on vehicles was from fuel cards. So drivers would go to the fuel pump, they'd punch in their digits, they would miskey the mileage. We'd figure it out sometimes when a car came in for maintenance and we would try to do the algorithm. 15 years ago, maybe we started selling connected vehicle hardware to help get data from those assets, which was still, very minimal at the time. Fast forward to today, the S curve and the rate of technology is absolutely staggering. There really isn't a car out there on the road today that isn't able to be connected to, real world connected vehicle data. I mean, you can connect your toaster and your refrigerator to your Bluetooth and get data from it. I think the challenge that we face today is the amount of data that we have makes it overwhelming. And where I think the future lies is being able to aggregate, normalize, and visualize that data to be able to make business decisions and take action with that data. Where I think at some point we're a little overwhelmed with all the data that's out there. So it's how do you get the right data at the right time? And I think, again, how do you have a podcast that doesn't talk about AI?
And
When you look at our business model, we do all of our own code and all of our own production and development ourselves. I was in London in December, and our chief technical officer told me we're writing 80% of our code, leveraging AI and AI assistance. And then 60 days later, we were at a leadership meeting in February, and he goes, we moved from 80 to 98%. But what that does is it changed the role of our product and development team that was writing code. Now what they're doing is they're filling in blocks, they're proofreading it. And now our product team can in real time create prototypes. So the ability for us to move at pace, to be agile, is just mind-blowing. And that's within a couple months. So I think when you have the right people that are working on the right things and really leveraging technology in the right way, it just makes us extremely nimble. And I think really just pushes, what's capable of happening and how we're capable of using this data in a more sophisticated way.
Yeah. So, and thank you for bringing up all of these examples. These are fantastic. And obviously you were talking about kind of what's going on in London and everything, but you're in Baltimore, back here in the States. I want to hear what are you guys doing here in the States? What's going on here?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's a completely different market when you're talking about Europe, where we also have offices in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, and then, when you look at the United States. And something I try to explain to a lot of the folks in Europe is when you lay the United States over Europe, California is London, Baltimore is Turkey. So it's just such a broad, diverse market. I think we've seen really great pushes in sustainable transportation and energy transition. I think you really look at the coasts. So, we're really proud. I think California continues to lead the way, and I think so does New York. We just launched, some new marketing around a transaction we closed. I'm actually going to be in Boston next Friday doing another podcast. So the company is Dollar Ride. Dollar Ride's just an incredible mission-driven company focused on expanding access to reliable and affordable transportation in really underserved urban communities with some things I call transit deserts in New York City. And then the capital partner we brought in is Chestnut Run Capital. So they're a specialized private credit provider working in that lower middle market to support capital. So we were able to bring in, a mission-driven, forward-thinking company. Sue Sani is the founder and CEO, just really great guy. So we're working with New York. We're able to leverage things like NYSERDA and government funding. We're able to bring in capital from a private capital fund and help him deploy non-emergency medical transportation, electric E350 transits to areas around Queens where, I think we all think in New York and you picture the movies and it's this dense area. Well, that's Manhattan. But there's 5 boroughs and you get into some of the Brooklyn areas or Queen areas, it's really tough when you're not right next to some of those subways to get around and navigate New York. So it's a really great business application for this technology where we're able to go into these areas and make a direct impact. Instead of having a car sit there and use CO2 and NOx into the community, we're able to pull that directly out of the community. And what our software does, again, I was on a call yesterday as we were planning our podcast. In real time, we have a lender who's in our platform. We have an operator in our platform, and we're able to see the first deployment of vehicles. We know that the first 3 cars just hit 1,000 miles in the community. We're able to pull up a map and see, hey, there's one in Flushing, there's one in Queens, one just rolled into Brooklyn. We're able to pull up real-time emission savings and see, wow, we just crossed over 1,600 kilograms of CO2 saved. We're able to pull up our platform and pull into, and again, if you're not an expert in this space, and I know I'm talking to CALSTART, so I'm sure everybody knows this, but CO2 goes up in the air and travels around the globe, right? NOx, off the tailpipe, off the tires, impacts that direct community. We're able to track NOx by the street that it's actually impacted on. So we're able to directly see the impact in those communities for transitioning to, decarbonization, zero emission vehicles. So it's just a really cool space where you don't have an operator who's sitting in some system talking about something or pointing to something, and a lender who's over here in an Excel spreadsheet talking about it. We're all on a call together looking at the same platform and the same live data. And it just makes the conversation so much easier when you're all looking at the same thing.
Yeah, it feels like it's a lot more frictionless than what you would normally have in a traditional, pulling everything together. So this is super exciting. So I guess on this, like, just to kind of wrap up, like where do you see zero emission transportation going and the role that he's playing?
Yeah. I mean, I think, first and foremost, I said it again, I think the future's data. But being able to data aggregation, normalization, and visualization to make better business decisions. But I think you can't do this transition without capital. So I think it is helping get the capital to push into this space in a way where they don't see it with this abnormal amount of risk. When you let's look at heavy duty zero emission assets. You get a lender who gets excited about, maybe it's a Tesla, cyber truck, semi truck. What's the residual on that asset? We have no idea. There's never been one sold in the United States before. So how do you get them comfortable with these assets they don't understand? And to me, the way you do that is by showing them that through a platform like ours, ZEOS, you can see where the asset is 24/7, 365. You can see the actual utilization of that asset at all times. You can see the loan value of that asset, the depreciation schedule. You can see the faults on the vehicle. You can see the battery health of these assets. So I think data is a way to take away some of that perceived fear and risk. That perceived fear and risk for operators means higher interest rates and less flexible capital. So by us being able to ingest this data and visualize it for these lenders, our goal is to push more capital into this space and to do it in a more flexible and cost-effective.
This is great. And John, thank you so much. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, how do they do it?
Yeah, LinkedIn is our world, so certainly on LinkedIn. Certainly also available, it's my name, jon.stafford@zeti.group, zeti.group, or catch me at your favorite conference.
Wonderful. Well, John, thank you so much for being members of CalSTART, and thank you for all the work you guys are doing.
It's a pleasure, man. Awesome to talk to you today, Jared.
You too. All right.